Good morning. Happy Friday. I'm going to take a quick poll here. Raise your hand if you have not been on a week-long RIE in the last 6 months. Raise your hand. All right. You guys are missing out. Right. And I say that mainly because there are really talented, capable people here at Denver Water that maybe you haven't had a chance to work with, that maybe you haven't had a chance to understand what they do and what they bring to Denver Water every day. So I'm going to say you guys are missing out. You got to figure out, even if you don't have a value stream in your section, you could be fresh eyes on another rapid improvement event. We have 3 today, and without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jean.
Great. Thank you. Okay, could I have the receiving team please come up?
Patrick, you're going to be after me. Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Older. I work in the trades. And so we did a warehouse receiving, RIE, this week. And as you can see, our team, we're a little bit smaller up here. But to my left, I'll introduce everybody. This is Patrick Perez, Don Myrick, Jimmy Hume, Kenny Palumbo, and Ken Juarez. We do have a couple people that had some training this morning and a couple other personal issues. So we're a little thin. So normally I would stand with Gene over there, but I'll take a couple of the slides just because we're a little less people. So there's our team. We do want to give some special thanks to Danny Lopez, Stacy Schreiner, Dan Huntenhake, sorry if I butchered your name, Josh Schwartz, Dave Galen, Renee Hutchinson, the warehouse staff, Cindy Brayman, and Pam Castillo-Belthauser. Okay, so the reason why we got together this week is that we had inconsistencies between the team members in the process of receiving of stock, non-stock, P-card shipments, which leads to delays in assessing inventory status and placing orders to maintain the necessary stock. Inconsistencies also create waste through extra steps in the process. Patrick.
Current state process, we have no SOPs, so it makes it time-consuming to do our job. Lack of understanding on a warehouse as a group to do a proper and efficient job. Tools all over, so if we have them all centralized, it'd be easier to do our job. More logging and books where we can do less paperwork, so that's light. Our current state right now is uncertainty, lack of information on end users' parts, unorganized once again. We are going to have a more structured work area, so that's going to be a big help. Our future state, or target state I should say, would be to streamline the process, which would be receive the freight, find out the end user, email their information, scan invoices directly to purchasing who needs the receipts and documents. Team accountability, we're all going to be accountable for doing the same type work, so it's going to be more efficient as a group effort. And I just want to thank the team to make my future job a whole lot easier, so thanks, team.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay, so we did a lot of gap analysis and what's wrong and how we want to fix it. We identified again what Patrick said. We didn't have any standard operating procedures or the SOPs he mentioned. We also had a lack of communication. It wasn't a very streamlined process, and we weren't involving all of the stakeholders. So, we weren't involving the other businesses that warehouse receiving impacts, and we certainly weren't involving the end users. Identifying some of the solutions, obviously, create a standard operating procedure. That was a huge one, and really took a lot of information, not only from the individuals within our team, but also the warehouse team. We did a lot of timed studies to decide, what's wrong, eliminate a lot of waste. We did implement a clear operating procedure. We have a clear-cut communication plan, and we also have a standardized what to expect from receiving, and here's what we need from you to help us out. And then the new process flow, we were able to eliminate most of the paper copies. So the logging book that the receiving team utilized is no longer utilized. So a lot of paper waste that we won't be utilizing anymore. We eliminated 7 steps in their process. We were able to cut down the time by about 50% in what it took from the current state to the new state. We were able to reduce a lot of motion and the amount of time that they were walking around. And we also included the other stakeholders that were involved in the process. So huge improvement to the process flow.
Thank you, Don. Oh, is it you?
Sorry, your turn.
Russ.
We have some before and after pictures of a receiving table and the cabinet. This is how we started out on Monday with all the stuff on there. We got rid of some stuff and relocated other things, and then it's our end result of the table. And we put a visual picture of what the table should look like all the time, and then have to do a weekly audit on the clutter and all that stuff. And this is the filing cabinet. We labeled it to show what was inside and got rid of everything on top.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. So when we were doing the revised process, we realized that there were some gray areas, unknowns, and assumptions, both on the warehouse side and from the end user side, as to what exactly the warehouse did. So we created an objectives and expectations statement, just clearly defining what the warehouse would be doing, and then what we as customers of the warehouse need to do in order to help them make sure that this continues to be an expedited process. There were some expectations versus reality situations regarding the capability. We were finding that there was an increased time for the warehouse to get products to us as end users because of the loads that we were putting on them. As well, we created a few email templates so that in the receiving process, we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time we communicate with the customer. So you'll start seeing some standardized emails as well if you do order things through the warehouse. So this is the new standard operating procedure. It was the main focus was of the RIE was the development of this. Kenny's going to touch on some of the specifics here in a minute, but we saw double-digit increases in productivity and efficiency across the board. And then finally, for me, I should say, is a skills matrix. Because it is a new process, effectively, revision, we pretty much redid the entire thing. Everybody now is going to be in training. So Heath will, over the course of the RIE follow-ups, will do some one-on-one time with the warehouse personnel to monitor, analyze, and advance them as they become comfortable with the new process.
So our leader standard of work goes toward our foreman. It's Heath. So Heath is going to go through this daily, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and continue all the projects. So we'll help him out with all that. So on the event matrix, we did create an SOP. Our success score, we were initially at 52%. We went to 75% and dropped 24%. Our cycle time to do a P card, it took us 10 minutes to enter one P card. We dropped that by 50%, and it took us only 2.5 minutes. That saved us 75%. On our travel time, it took us 250 steps to do a P card. It dropped it down to 90 steps. That saved us 64%. So as far as our skill matrix and cross-training, I will be working with the 7 gentlemen throughout all the process until we get everything together. Our completion plan, as you can see, Heath has most of it, but I'll help him through that. And we'll move on from there. And of course, I get to build a rack when it comes in a month. Our lesson insights, we had some good ones. We are going to be more efficient in the warehouse the way we do work. Bettering our communication with end users. And there is one in there that says, "We know where the hoarders of whiteout are." Make sure, honest and transparent communications between us and the end users. And we did what was right, not what was easy. Questions?
Yes, actually. So that's going to be published in the Conduit next week. What the expectations of, it's part of that objectives and what did we call it? Thank you. Responsibilities. I keep wanting to call something different. It's part of that document that we created, and it's going to go out in the Conduit next week. You'll also be able to find it on Inflow. But basically, some of the key takeaways for the end user is that when you are ordering something, we're asking that you be very specific in the shipping detail. One of which is to include your first and last name. If you don't have your first and last name included, the warehouse doesn't know where it's supposed to be. It takes a lot of time for them to look it up. And those are all things that they're actually not going to be doing anymore. They're not going to go through the extra legwork to try and find a packing slip or to try and figure out where the end user is or where the end user is or who they are. So that's one of the key takeaways for the end user is to make sure that you're including that appropriate information when you are ordering. Again, we wanted to really focus on joint responsibility. Just because the warehouse has always done it in the past doesn't mean that it's necessarily what they should be doing, and we want it to be more efficient across the board. So that would be my key takeaway for the end user or the purchaser, is just to make sure that you're being really clear on when you're ordering something that you are including that on the shipping address label. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah. Sure. So, in the warehouse, it really was a lot of steps. So there was a lot of wasted space. So when the pallet would come in, they would start at the dock door. They would literally open the package, go through it, try and find the packing slip. Then they would walk over, I don't even know how many steps it was, but they'd walk over to a table, and then they would log the information. Then they would go from that table all the way to their separate work area in the corner of the warehouse, look up the end user, try and determine what their phone number was. Then they would either make the phone call there or walk back. Either way, they had to walk back. Then they would make a call to the end user. Okay, what's the last four of your P card number, which that we don't need anymore, so that's a step taken out. Once they had that information, then they would make a copy of the packing slip. They would walk back, put the copy in their stack to be filed, walk back to the package, include the packing slip in there, document it, and then take it over to a staging area. So what we really did is eliminated them walking back and forth to their individual working station. Instead of walking back and forth from the package to the workstation, taking all the packages closer to the workstation. Everything's on their workstation now, a joint computer that they can utilize, phone, all the tools they need have been removed from various areas within the warehouse and centralized on that one workstation. So we're eliminating tons of that back and forth and kind of the merry-go-round aspect. I think you had a question?
Oh, I just had a quick question. If we're emailing stuff to the warehouse, right, will we get a notification when our order's ready?
You will. You will get a notification of when your order's ready, and there could be several different ways in which you will get a notification. It will definitely be emailed to you. And that's one reason we really wanted to thank the personnel in the mailroom, is because they're going to be helping out as a joint effort. When items come into the warehouse, if it's a single-use item, a smaller package, it will now go to the mailroom, and when the mailroom personnel makes their afternoon deliveries, they're going to assist us in delivering those items to you so that the warehouse personnel isn't taken away. They're not sure where people are. The mailroom personnel are more familiar with the people in the admin building. That's one way. Second, if it is a large shipment or rather heavy, multiple packages, that's where we're going to ask the joint user or the end user to have joint responsibility. You'll get an email notifying you, hey, your package is here, but it has multiple shipments or it's rather large. We need you to help us and tell us when you want this delivered. So there's actually a form that can be utilized so that, again, it's a joint effort. when is best for us to deliver this to you, make sure you're there to receive it. And then the other aspect is for the outlying buildings and the treatment plants off-site. They'll get a similar email saying your stuff is here. It'll be ready for you when you come to pick it up. That process hasn't changed a whole lot. Anybody else?
So I'd just quickly like to thank the team, thank our end users for taking the time to spend with our using group to make our process better. I'd especially like to thank the warehouse personnel. We have been moving their cheese for I don't know how many years now. They've moved from one building to trailers to now they're in this beautiful building, and they're really open to change. You know, I walked around throughout the week, and they're just so excited about the process improvements and the momentum that we're going to build. So this is the first of many events that we're going to improve their process, and they're more than willing, and I commend you for wanting to make the change. So thank you.
All right, next is the IT Asset Management Rapid Improvement Event Team. All right, so for this event, we had Christine Perez as the process owner and Virginia Roberts as the team leader. So I'll go ahead and hand it on over to them.
Thank you. Introductions. Christine Perez. I am the manager of the IT Asset Management Department.
Virginia Roberts, Business Technology Management Office.
Keith Oligny, IT Infrastructure.
Rob Brennan, IT Infrastructure.
Andrew Vale, analyst with the ITAM department.
Ewa Her, procurement. Danielle Ross, IT administration.
Eric Decker, IT Program Management Office and Applications.
I'm Anthony Peck, and I manage the help desk and the client support team. So I'm going to hand it back over to Christine.
So we wanted to start out first by giving special thanks to the IT team, to Jimmy Hume, who was assigned to 2 separate RIEs last week, and a Print Shop, the executive team, Pam Peschel, Paul Freeman, and 3M and Nestle helped us get through that week.
And probably Sharpie.
And Sharpie as well, yes. So our reason for action, we didn't have a defined or business-driven vetting or approval process for renewals and managing IT software assets. We wanted to establish a framework and a set of processes for strategically tracking and managing the financial, physical, licensing, and contractual aspects of IT assets through their life cycle. So GT reported that the GT report determines there is an opportunity to save money and align spend for hardware and software by formalizing and instituting an effective software and hardware asset management process. That's what we were doing. Current state, you want.
So our current state, if you look up here, we have not been good stewards of IT hardware software spend. For Denver Water, the ostriches represent the business, and the humans on here are IT. As you can see, the back end of the ostrich, those are dollars that are coming out.
Our target state is that IT will have a process in place with clearly defined metrics to ensure that the business is being fiscally responsible, and IT work in collaboration with the business to ensure that the best decisions are being made when purchasing IT assets.
We performed a gap analysis and a solution approach. During this gap analysis, we realized that there's a bit of process that's being, I guess, glided right through, and we needed to focus a lot more on how we process these. And we ended up with a solution approach that included a business-driven approach to software renewals and new software acquisitions.
So in our target state, we ended up utilizing a lean concept called a flow cell. And in our new process and standard work, we have 2 flow cells. The first will be, I'll generally title it planning the work and identifying what needs to be analyzed or assessed. So in the next few weeks, we're going to be getting together and looking at the full list of software titles. We were surprised to learn that Denver Water owns over 200 pieces of software. So we will be looking at that in the coming weeks and figuring out a schedule for assessing each one. Depending how big each piece of software is, how complex it is, how many people use it, how many other software applications it integrates with, etc., we may need more lead time than other simpler solutions. So we're going to get together and we're going to put together a schedule of when we're going to evaluate each title. Also during that time, we're going to figure out which business division, well, we already know which business division uses each package, but we're going to identify business process owners for each title. As Eric mentioned, this is a business, we want to switch this over to a business-driven process. So we will be identifying one person per title to help us collaborate through flow cell number 2.
Flow cell number 2. So flow cell number 2, the participants in flow cell 2 will include the BTMO, IT, and business owners. And they're going to meet to evaluate criteria using a CBA tool similar to that to ultimately get to a recommendation to submit to the BT system managers that will include a recommendation of renew, eliminate, consolidate, or acquire new. And from that, we also did create a standard work that included all of these processes, roles, and responsibilities.
So, sorry. What you're looking at behind me, I know it's too small, is a bunch of sticky notes, thank you 3M, of all of the software titles that Denver Water owns. If you guys don't remember anything else we say today, remember this. I want you guys to go into room 209. Either later, are we moving it there today? Okay. No, we're moving it to 209. 209, either later today or next week, and I want you to look at this wall board. We have broken out each software title, how much it costs, and we have categorized it by division. And when you go in that room, I want you to not look at it through the lens of a Denver Water employee. I want you to look at it through the customer-centric lens. I want you to look at it, how much everything costs, and ask yourself, if I were a Denver Water customer, which many of you also are, would I be all right with this? Does this tell me that Denver Water is walking the walk and talking the talk of our old slogan of use only what you need? Are we licensing software that only what we need? I'll tell you, we were also surprised to learn that our total software spend every year is approximately $6.2 million. So again, if you put on the customer-centric lens, does that seem like the right thing to do? What's next?
All right, so we created a visual tool that we're replacing in strategic areas around the company. And what we would like people to see is what our actual goal is each year, what our start state is at that goal, and then we will update the current state every month or milestone, whichever one we hit. We didn't feel like ostriches hemorrhaging money was the appropriate way to go, so we channeled Bob Ross and did some happy little trees. So you can't really see it in the image. This was just a draft that the print shop put together. I'll have the actuals done next week. Each tree is going to have money taped to their head. So of course 100% is going to be very blingy with all the pennies. Our start state will have where we're at, and then Eric and or I will come through as each metric is met each month and update the middle channel. So this is just a way for us to try to involve and inspire everyone and do it in a motivational, not demotivational way.
This way. So we've got a couple metrics that we wanted to focus on. The first one was We want to reduce the actual spend per user as it relates to software. So we currently has $52.63. We want to reduce that to $49.94 or $48.94 by the end of the year. And we want all of the renewals to go through the value management process that we had spoke about a little bit earlier. And that's it.
Our completion plan, task we need to follow up in the short term to really kick off this process. We need to get a renewal report of all contracts expiring from now up to 2023. So we'll use that list to do an initial scrub and kind of categorize everything, prioritize, and set the schedule to really start selecting what we're going to look at first. As Virginia mentioned, we're going to really try to identify not just divisional, sectional level, but individuals to kind of take ownership of all the titles and licenses, which might be a fairly daunting task. On top of that, we're going to try to, as best we can, define a core functionality for each title. And what that's going to do is allow us to see where we might have some redundancies and things that we might be able to share across teams. And then ultimately, we're going to import all that data into Flexera, which is our IT software and hardware asset management system. So we have a sole source to kind of look at all this data. And then our team leaders will be crafting a process board, and I think that'll go in room 209 as well. And that will capture not only the schedule of renewals or reviews, but all the decisions that ultimately are going to be made through this process.
So insights. This was a long week and we learned a lot. I won't read all of these, but many of us are new to choosing by advantages, and we went through that process as a possible tool to use, and we think we're going to try to use that for this. We also grew an awareness of how much we are spending on software titles, and we also, let me see, what else do I want to point out? We also realized that this is going to be a very difficult change process to go through, to change towards this assessment. Process is hard, but it will be worth it. Many of us are tired, but also excited to start this and feel positive that we're moving in the right direction. Do you guys have any questions for us? That's an excellent question. Okay. The question was, how are we going to involve the accounting group when we retire a particular asset so that they make sure that they record the change on our financial statements? Do you want to address the hardware-software difference? Or?
Right now, you were specifically speaking to software or hardware and hardware. So, okay. Sure. Absolutely. Valid point. And honestly, with hardware, I know, and Jimmy Hume may still be in here, we are actually, when we are retiring, as for hardware, that process is very defined. And if it is a capital budget, he is, who are you actually sending that information to? I know it used to be when we have to retire expense hardware that needs to go to the capital for accounting. I can't remember her name that we were actually sending that information to. Rose. Erin May. So we are actually including them for hardware. Software, we did not address that. And I don't know that, I did not realize that that was the case, actually.
Well, I think what we could do is get with somebody in accounting, identify which ones you are capturing as an asset,
Exactly.
and then as we go through this process, that'll tell us that we need to circle back around to you if we do make a change.
It's is it a dollar limit? Is there it's 50,000. Oh, okay. Okay, I was not aware. So that's something.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was not included.
Yes.
That was an excellent question. I do know that for anything that we get rid of, there is a change, and sometimes you're moving them from point A to point B. So for every software package that we eliminate, we are going to have to go through some change management to make that happen. Angela.
I'll ask the tough question. For those of us
The short answer is yes. So thank you. Angela's question was, she's going to ask the hard question. For those of us who are for those of you who are owners of software packages or users of software packages, what is expected of you when we evaluate it? Do you guys need to provide a business case? The short answer is yes. It may not look like the full-blown business case template that we use for new purchases. What we were thinking is, in conjunction with the CBA process that incorporates a lot of the tech specs that the ITAM team currently assesses, what we will incorporate something that, yes, I will be asking you, what do you use this for? What benefits do you realize from it? What's the value you gain? And what's the risk of not having it? So yes, thank you for asking that.
Jim. So I can't remember the specifics of the GT report, but do you have a sense about our software spend relative to other utilities, and ultimately from the $6.2 million, where you think we can get? Obviously, SCADA or something, we're not just going to get rid of. And there's a limited universe, I think, probably of software packages that are potentials to get rid of.
Yes.
Do you have a sense about kind of where we are relative to other utilities and where you think we might go?
So Jim asked, do we have a sense of how we compare to other utilities in our software spend, and have we identified those software titles that we can't get rid of, and those are potential candidates? I'll answer that in two parts. I can't remember numbers, but yes, the GT report did identify, I believe, overall IT spend was higher than our peers. I don't remember software. In the rapid improvement event, we did identify a money target of 10%, right? For this year. However, we are balancing that with a do the right thing long-term goal. That there are some opportunities to reduce spend that may include an increase in this year's budget, but over the long haul will decrease the support costs and the licensing. We won't know the answer to your other question, which is, are there candidates, until we go through that process and over the next few weeks of looking at the full list. But that is our intention, is to try to identify those. This is a category of, yes, we have to have these. Yeah. Yes. Jonathan.
Did you guys talk about that transition? So if you identify a software product that needs to go away, obviously there's work around that, right? So there may be process changes, that maybe you use something else, and maybe we don't do this anymore. So, you know, there's work associated with that. What does that look like, or did you guys talk about that?
We talked about it, and Christine was really great in driving home, hey, we need to think about this. We can't just leave it out there. You're absolutely right. If we decide to make a change, whether it's a replacement software title or stop doing it, you're absolutely right. There's going to be work that's required for change management to do that. We didn't address the standard work or the process for each of those, but to your point, it will vary depending on what it is. So we need to stay cognizant of the fact that if we do make a decision down that path, that we need to work with the business process it either initiates a project for the IT PMO, or it's a change management process that will work with CI and the business on. So yeah, that is a place on the process map with a sticky that says somewhere else, TBD. Yes.
Okay, we're not buying this anymore.
Right. No, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, sorry.
We're not going to pass the buck like that. No.
Mentioned that we're trying to.
Go ahead.
We're going to do an initial pass-through of all of our software. We're starting next week to try to create what kind of a lead time we may have to have. And on some of these, it's like 2 years, 2 to 3 years lead time to figure out if we're going to do something different. And it'll depend. But we're committed to doing the right thing and taking the time that we need to do it. And change management is something that we haven't really done a lot of on getting rid of software. So this will be a new leaf. This will be new for us. Yes.
Out of your 200 plus packages, how many of those packages, software packages, are actually used for reporting purposes, generating reports?
Great question. Do you know the answer?
No, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's part of our. We do not have the answer to that, and that is part of our initial work that we're going to have to do this next week, where we're going to be defining functionality, getting business owners understanding that. We know some titles, but not necessarily all of them, the functionalities.
I can list off titles.
So the team can stay afterwards if there's any other questions. We do have one more team, so in respect for time, I'm going to keep us going. I'd also like to invite Chris Dermody up to say a few words.
Thank you, Christy, and thanks for doing an awesome job this week organizing and facilitating this team. And I'd like to thank every team member here for this week's worth of work. This was a tough process. As you know, and as you can tell, this is more than just putting in place some new processes. This is fundamentally changing culture. And it's changing culture in a very important way. It's core to the GT recommendations and our business technology transformation. And this is just the beginning. I mean, as you can tell from the team's update, there's a long road ahead, and it's going to evolve. As we bring the business into the process of essentially owning IT in ways they never have before and making the decisions about the investments, it's going to be a whole new world. And these guys are leading the charge. Thanks for all of your work this week and for all of your continued work in the future. Thank you.
All right, our next team looked at the watershed and roles and responsibilities for that, so I will invite the team on up. So there was one point during the week where someone came up to me and said, you know, I don't think I've ever had people seen me that mad before. And I thought, man, I didn't realize I had that effect on people. But no, it really goes to show that we have passionate people at Denver Water, right? In the right positions where they really care about the processes that they have and they really care about really wanting to improve them. So with that, I'll pass it on to the team.
Good morning. I'm Christina Burry, Watershed Scientist in External Affairs. I am the process owner along with James Barrier for the Watershed and Reservoir Data Rapid Improvement Event. This is our team photo. I'm very proud of our team. I'm very proud to be a part of this team. You can see from the photo and the folks standing up here that we represent a lot of different divisions within the organization, and that's because a lot of different divisions have different needs for watershed and reservoir data. So I'm going to pass the microphone down and have folks introduce themselves, their name, title, and division.
Hi, I'm Kevin Urey. I'm in the External Affairs group and the Water Resource Strategy subgroup.
My name is Cindy Brady. I'm in External Affairs and Raw Water Supply.
Tom Mountfort, Admin Services, Environmental Compliance Manager.
Heath Sturkey, Source of Supply, Strontia Springs Reservoir.
Allison Witheridge, Watershed Scientist in Water Resources Strategy, External Affairs. I'm new.
It's okay, she's new. She's just trying to figure that out. As we all are.
James Barrier, Water Quality Operations.
Patty Brubaker, Treatment.
Paula Dacus, Water Resource Strategy, Environmental Planning.
Matt Bolton, Water Treatment Engineering.
Craig McGonigal, Water Quality Laboratory.
I also want to mention Abby Antolovich also participated, and John Nolte, and two members that aren't here today, Diego Portillo and Eric Abbott. We want to give special thanks to the following for providing their support: Eric Edwards, Fred Sanchez, Matt Mercer, Nicole Poncelet, Selena Hernandez-Ruiz, the Marston plant staff for hosting, and also I want to thank Water Quality Operations team and the Water Quality Lab staff for their support in this process as well. So what is a watershed? Denver Water has 2.5 million acres of watersheds in its collection system. The term watershed is to connect water to land. So in our collection system, we have natural infrastructure known as watersheds that carry water through our reservoirs to our treatment plants. It all starts with precipitation on mountaintops that run down the mountainsides, through the landscape, through forests, to streams, reservoirs, and then our treatment plant.
So the reason for action, basically the roles and responsibilities for the watershed monitoring program have not been clearly defined, and that was kind of highlighted by some recent changes in personality and capacity. Basically, we have two different programs. There's the watershed sampling program that does like flowing waters, as well as the reservoir sampling program, which does in-reservoir sampling.
That is me. So I think we're all aware that Denver Water's strategic plan has in it multiple pieces, and I wanted to highlight one specifically, and that's one of the 4 strategic perspectives. Specifically, this quote that's up on the board right now is directly associated with excellent operations, and in that we make the statement that we sustain healthy watersheds and an excellent collection and treatment and delivery system, and that we're going to provide high quality water through that system at affordable rates. So in doing that, we recognize that we need to be proactive, dedicated stewards, and to protect our source water now and into the future. And that kind of makes that link to the watershed bigger picture. We also want to make sure we're achieving savings in our treatment processes, and certainly looking at watersheds can help us in that goal. Increasing reliability and longevity of our facilities as well, in addition to monitoring and responding to anticipated growth and impact of urbanization on our watersheds. And then the last couple would be to be prepared to respond to disasters and unanticipated events, and then also be a leader in our community and in our watersheds.
So the current state was really just some questions or unanswered questions. Who owns the current plan? Is the current plan up to date? We have all this data. Who uses the treatment data? Who uses the data, and is it the right data? Really unanswered question. And how do we access the data? So just some unanswered questions.
Thank you, Tom. This is the target state. And what you have up there depicted is you have on the top layer the Crown, which is an owner of some kind, either committee or subcommittee. And they're interfacing with all the elements inside of Denver Water, the E-team, legal, laboratory, and then that goes down into another group that understands the needs of the organization as it applies to the customer. That's the $ that's in the middle that's there. And then that rolls down to what looks to be a dashboard, which is the interface to all of this data. A lot of people need this data. A lot of internal, a lot of external people need this. Treatment, external affairs, engineering. And so we want to make it easy to get to this data. And then once you get that, you see the reports that are down there, and the reports are supported by the resources of Denver Water, either the scientists and the brains or whoever really needs that. And ultimately, you go down to the happy customer. So what we want is something nice and ordered, somewhat centralized, and something that's very deliberate and planned.
So this really goes to the report out right before us. As you can see, we have all kinds of reporting databases and reporting software. So one of our problem statement was exactly that. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of users, and a lot of people don't know how to use the data or where to get the data or what's the best way to get it. So we made a list of all the reporting tools, so we can give that to you guys, and all the databases. And we have all the pros and cons for each. So we kind of did all that busy work beforehand. And we will have a dashboard. We're not sure exactly where it's going to be housed yet, but it'll have a list of everything that we use for watershed data. This is really watershed data. We're going to get into water treatment in another event. But it's going to be housed where people can go and find where the data is, what tool to use, and who the person is to contact if you need information.
Me. Okay, so the big question of ownership, the problem statement was there's a lack of ownership for the watershed monitoring plan and that plan design and regular updates. So the first thing that we needed to do was get on the same page about what's the difference between the watershed monitoring program or the watershed monitoring plan and the watershed program. They all have watershed in it. So as you've heard, that the watershed program, which Christina is leading, and some of you are involved in the watershed steering committee, which was created last year, is an effort to create watershed action plans in our conveyance system and in our watersheds, looking holistically. That certainly uses the data, but is a bigger effort, and that is spearheaded by our team, Christina and I. And then the watershed monitoring is all of the points upstream of water treatment plants, flowing and reservoir data. And those were created and monitored over the last 20, 30 years by various needs that have been brought up by treatment, by planning, for project-related and project-specific sites in engineering and in planning, or perhaps for compliance monitoring or permit, either to anticipate new water sources coming online like 401. So that is a big enterprise organizational effort. So in looking at ownership, well, who owns that? Well, everybody who has a watershed or a need for that data is really the owner of their data. And we want to move to question-based monitoring of, if you have a need, then what's the question that you want to get with that, or what's the question you want to answer with that data? What are the specifics, which James is going to go into? How are you going to access the data, and how do you need to view it? And so how do you do that? That's a lot across the board. So we're going to try, this is our experiment, of utilize an existing committee, the Watershed Steering Committee. And you can see, I don't know if you can't actually see that, but we have pretty much every division listed on here, and we've already reached out to a great number of people. We might need to add a few more to be a part of that committee. So each of those stakeholders are within this Watershed Steering Committee. They'll bring their need to the Watershed Steering Committee. The Watershed Steering Committee will be a platform for discussion, for identifying efficiencies, for reducing duplication, and really just a really good across the organization communication point for that watershed monitoring needs. That will then, it's hard though to work with 25, 30 people and have everyone as an owner. So we're going to create a monitoring core team whose responsibility it is to do this kind of near-term update of the monitoring plan, and then be responsible for those regular updates. We also want to make sure that this is in alignment with our strategic plan, and that it is a value add to the organization, and that will also be a responsibility of the monitoring core team. As the existing facilitators of the Watershed Steering Committee will retain that role for the watershed program. We also discussed an E-team sponsor for this group that hasn't been fully fleshed out, but there is a potential that we would need that liaison for future work.
All right, so we've defined the roles and responsibilities, and we kind of went through the thought process. Well, what's the next step? Are we at a stage now where we can write this plan? And we decided, no, that's a huge process. We need to take our time, get it right, get input from all the users. But at the very least, during this week, we can lay out a framework to kind of guide this process and really set the stage for success in the long term. So I just want to talk about kind of what we came up with the new framework. And there's some important components here. This is really kind of a paradigm shift on how we look at the planning process and how this plan is executed. So a couple major components. Every sample or every piece of data is tied to a user, and this is important because that way we can ensure that everything we're doing is creating value for the company. Sampling in the watershed, the data processing, everything the lab handles, that is resource intensive, time intensive, and if we can prove from the start that every action in this step, in this process, is creating value, that's a step in the right direction. Along with that, like she mentioned, we're doing question-based monitoring. We're not just doing blanket monitoring because it seems right or it feels good. We're tying objectives to actual actions. This is very important. Every request or project has a specific time frame. So we're not just adding things to this project that just stay for infinity. We set limits. We can reassess later on when those kind of checkpoints hit, but at least we're constantly assessing each action that we're doing within this plan. Beyond that, next slide, please. We've laid out, in addition to the framework, we've laid out a completion plan to get this done. So we have some major components here. So the actual written plan, we hope to have that out and available by the first 90 days, early June. Once that's established, we can start with any training or SOP updates that we have, and we'll actually put the new plan into effect August 1st. That's the goal. We really want to get things established quickly, take care of any wasted resources as soon as we can. We don't want to put it off till next year. We want to get this done as soon as we can. We also talked about some ways of sharing data in the short term until we figure out some of the software solutions. So we're working on an external data request portal through GIS, so that'll be coming online soon in the first 90 days. And then also, where does this get housed? So we're taking this out of just water quality. This is an organizational initiative now. We want everyone to have access, to be involved. So we need a central place to store all of that. So that'll be coming online in the first 90 days as well.
The metrics for this event, roles and responsibilities defined. Our initial state was 25%. Through this week-long RAI event, we were able to completely identify those. Watershed and reservoir sites tied to a customer with an analyte, or what specifically are they looking at? Initial state was approximately 10%. Target state is 100%, obviously, as we've just discussed, and we hope to accomplish that within the first 90 days. And then water quality manages contract lab work for assigned samples. The initial state was 100%, which we identified through this event. Some new metrics that we came up with was to go along with the safety component of an assignment refusal for the guys going out to collect the samples. So really giving them a tool to refuse an assignment because of safety concerns, and then a way for us to track that, to say, if there's things that we need to change in the future, do we need to move the site? Do we need to do something at the site specifically to improve safety? Another metric is validate the data used. Is it relevant? And review that on an annual basis to make sure we stay on top of it. And then, of course, tracking monitor costs to support our overall strategic plan.
So what did we learn during this week? It's hard to read all the... Oh, what?
We're apparently a wordy crew.
It's true. So we're not going to read all this, but there were definitely some common themes about what we did learn. And we all recognize that our watersheds are vast and complex. But I think one of the new insights is that we recognize there's really a tremendous amount of expertise, knowledge, and passion across the whole organization to be engaged and responsible for the quality of our raw water. And so it's together we're accepting this ownership and commitment to implement a cost-effective and efficient watershed and reservoir monitoring program, and to carry forth this new overall watershed program.
Great. So how do we feel? As an engineer, I don't typically share how I feel at the end of a workday. So this was a new concept for me, but really early on in the week, the words that were going on our feeling board were uncertain, unclear. There was a lot of confusion. But by the end of the week, it was obvious that we were inspired and confident that the work that we had done and the watershed monitoring plan going forward was going to add value to the organization and really help define what we're doing. So we were really happy about how we felt. And then the Denver Water values, we think we touched on all of the values over the course of the week. Two that I want to point out is passion, and Austin mentioned this earlier, there was a lot of passion. And I think that was great to see that people really care about what we're doing and care that we're doing it for the right reasons. But I think we were able to couple that with respect for one another to really come to solutions that are inclusive of everyone that was involved in the process, and really see that we're adding value to what we're doing and for our customer, not just the organization. So with that, I think we're going to open it up for questions and comments. One thing I would like to say is a special thank you to Austin for facilitating our group. He was able to keep us on target most of the time and out of the weeds, and so we appreciate that a lot.
That's similar to my question on the software. Do you have a sense, as you look at what we're measuring and where we're measuring it, and why we're measuring it, and who the end user is, to kind of it's going to be a lot more targeted, a lot more consolidated, a lot more efficient, and that will obviously have ripple effects all the way through the lab, to Fred's group, all the way. You have kind of a sense as to what's out there in terms of the overall waste that you think you can get at?
The question was, do we have a sense for the overall waste and what are the identified needs for the watershed and reservoir data? And yeah, we have a really good sense. We've done a lot of work leading up to this event to identify using a past watershed monitoring plan that was from 2015 that laid out rationale for the current data that we are looking at and using. And so we took a look at that rationale and we are updating what that is. But I think the key is with the work of the steering committee and the core team is to tie each sample or analyte, each data point to a customer and to a need. So we are in the process of defining those needs through that watershed steering committee and the core team. But understanding, that was a huge work effort just to understand currently what the rationale was behind what we need. Also, as part of this event, we looked at all the different reporting tools, the raw data sources, and got a sense from that what people are using, what would be more convenient for them in the future. So that's a little bit separate from the monitoring plan creation and need identification. That's more of how we are going to understand the data and interpret the data. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I also want to give a back-to-back award to Cindy.
Yeah. Yes. Do you want to say? No.
You want to explain that, Jim? For those of you who don't know, Cindy spent 2 weeks solid. Yeah. So.
All last week, and then this event, so I want to know what you're doing next week.
I'm catching up. But the first week of April, I'm taking a vacation.
That's good.
So the water industry in general focuses in on the finished product that we provide our customers. And now there's a shift. So in the watershed, if you will, the term watershed health, can you elaborate on that for us? Because we know that you're putting together a watershed plan, but watershed health, that's a key word now in the water industry. So can you do that for us?
And the term watershed health is purely from the perspective of who's defining that term for their own need. So Austin, if you can go back to the slide that, that Kevin linked to the sustainability plan or the strategic plan. So this, to answer your question, for Denver Water and what they consider to be a value or investment in watershed health, it's for these reasons.
Maybe can I add to that? I'd like to add to that a little bit. I think it's maybe a little bit different direction to Fred's question, and it has to do with thinking of, Fred's right. Historically, we thought about, treated water going out, and we didn't care about what happened upstream. And quite frankly, Denver's been extremely fortunate that we have snowmelt that comes right off the mountains. Most of the country doesn't have that luxury. With our growth and population, the demand on those areas in the watershed for recreational uses, obviously we have forests that are in an unhealthy condition as experienced from some major fires that we've experienced. We're in a new era, and we have to be thinking about that, and we really want to try to be proactive about that approach. And Denver Water, historically, we started out with watershed planning, trying to think about our water quality from a reservoir by reservoir process. And we started to recognize that that wasn't going to sustain us for the long term, that we needed to start looking more landscape watershed level. And so that's really what I talked to the team a lot about this week. Was this is kind of some growing pains for this organization. We're having to think about things differently, and we want to do that proactively, not reactively. And so really the point is that, watershed health is important because we have many factors, urbanization, unhealthy forests, a lot of rec use that are creating impacts in that source water that we haven't had to deal with in the past. And so that's what we're trying to do with our watershed planning effort, and really figuring out where to monitor in that to really keep our thumb on the pulse of what's happening on water quality. So that's really the watershed health component.
With that, the team will be here for questions afterwards if anyone has any other questions. Fred is going to come up.
Fred has 1 minute to say something. I promise I'm going to try. So Nicole Poncelet Johnson, she's actually our director for water quality and treatment. She cannot be here today, so she asked me to say a few kind words to our team. I can tell you, I agree with everybody. It was really cool to witness all of the silos, actually the walls were getting knocked down. Through our MDI, Managing Daily Improvement, everybody's familiar with that. In addition to that, CI Concepts, it was really cool to see everybody knock those silos down, bringing different sections together and making it work. What was really cool about this is who is actually going to own this. That was the key. So for Denver Water, everybody's all about the people, right? So the concept here is to work as a team to make decisions for Denver Water to make sure that our new watershed program is going to be successful. So thank you very much for all of your hard work. I know it was a long week, and I learned a lot, and I hope we can work together in the future and make this a successful program. Thank you.
45 seconds.
All right. Thank you again. I'm going to ask the question one more time. How many have not been on a week-long improvement activity in the last 6 months? All right.
Don't recommend doing 2 in a row.
Don't do 2 in a row. So you guys are missing out. And when I started, I talked about meeting talented people across Denver Water. I will give you an idea that there is no better way for you to learn about other aspects of Denver Water than to get on an improvement activity with other team members. There were, I think, Rick, you can sort of speak to this a little bit, that there are aspects of how we run the enterprise that you just never get a chance to understand unless you're in with your peers and your teammates for a full week, immersing yourself in solving a particular problem. So I'll put that out there, and everybody have a great weekend.